Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I'm actually a school teacher, so when I say good morning, I actually expect people to say good morning. My name's Leanne Cameron, and I am a lecturer at James Cook University in beautiful Townsville. So those people who think they're enjoying the summer here, it's much nicer in Townsville. What I would like to say is welcome to all of you. I am very excited to introduce our speakers today, but just before I do, I would like to just update you a little bit. My role is in the School of Education, and I teach our to-be teachers, the pre-service teachers, how to teach technology. And you may or may not be aware that through the work of a number of people, the Australian curriculum now requires every student in an Australian school to learn coding from year 3. So we have this wonderful resource coming towards you, so watch your backs is all I can say. So I'm very pleased to for you to meet Anna. Anna Emerson may be familiar to those of you who are Google partners because she's been in and out of the Google realm for some time. So without further ado, she's also a local girl, by the way, so say hi. She's used to the hot weather as well, but she's now residing in Sydney. So I'll pass off to Emma. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Leanne, and thank you everybody for coming today. I know there's tough competition, a great program. We've got 25 minutes together to talk about how Google runs large production systems with a methodology that we call site reliability engineering. So today I'm going to ground us with a little bit of context on why you might want an organization that focuses on reliability. And then I'm going to talk you through what I see as the 3 most fundamental principles that underpin successful SRE. Before I do that, can I get a sense of who's in the room today? Can you put your hand up if you're a student? Quite a few, that's good. Can you put your hand up if you'd heard of site reliability engineering before this talk? Most people, that's great. Hands up if you're in an organization that practices SRE. Okay, quite a few, that's wonderful. And hands up if you are a site reliability engineer. 2 people, and I think I know them both. Great. Clicker. Great, okay, so I'll introduce myself. My name's Anna Emerson. I work down in Google Sydney. I worked for a long time on Google Photos. In the last 18 months, I've worked on the Google Cloud platform. I am originally from Brisbane, as Leanne mentioned. I went to uni just down the river at UQ. I grew up in Indooroopilly, and I guess that's why I'm doubly excited to be speaking here today. I knew some wonderful technical women at university, but I certainly wasn't plugged into any communities or networks of women here. So it's really special to be speaking in front of so many wonderful technical women. Thank you for having me. There we go. So let's begin, now that we've introduced each other a little bit, by talking about the long-term cost of maintaining software systems. So we talk a lot about how to develop software effectively and fast. Organizations pride themselves on the caliber of software engineers who they hire, but we don't talk as much about how to operate and maintain software systems after they've been launched. And this is a problem because most estimates suggest that this is the most expensive part of the software lifecycle. So I'm going to talk to you today about how Google addresses this problem with a methodology and a part of our organization called site reliability engineering, which is a framework for operating large-scale production systems reliably. It was developed at Google 16 years ago now, but it's widely used in many organizations and has been used to great success. The SRE motto at Google is hope is not a strategy. So by that we mean we don't deploy software and hope that it doesn't break. We try and be really disciplined in understanding how it works and what the risks associated with it are. We don't hope that if something does break, that we catch it quickly, and we don't hope that our tools will be able to fix this. We test these sort of processes regularly. So I'm going to talk you through 3 of the principles that allow us not to hope, that allow us to treat system reliability in a more rigorous manner. Firstly, we need a way of quantifying how reliable we need to be. Google uses what we call SLOs, service level obligations, to do this, and we need some kind of organizational consequences for when these SLOs aren't being met. Secondly, any effective SRE organization needs the time and the organizational support to invest in long-term system reliability improvements that make tomorrow better than today. And thirdly, it's essential that any reliability organization treats failure as an opportunity to improve the reliability of our systems long-term. Okay, let's start with SLOs, our tool for quantifying our desired level of reliability. So why would we want to quantify reliability? Because it's very easy to take for granted until it's missing. But when it's missing, nothing else matters. So if we take this to the extreme, it actually becomes pretty self-evident. So it doesn't matter what new shiny features you've launched if users can't access your system. I heard the analogy a couple of weeks ago that reliability is like air, breathable air in a building. It's not usually listed as one of the features, but if it's missing, all bets are off, right? It doesn't matter how new your carpet is. So that's why we say that reliability is your most important feature. So we should measure reliability because we want to see when we're slowly slipping, if we're degrading our level of service, how reliable should we be? What do you think your organization, the leads of your organization would say if you asked them? 100%, that's great. Yeah, more. So it might come as a surprise to leadership who then their knee-jerk reaction is to say 100% that this is never what we aim for within Google. So the first reason we don't aim for it is because it's kind of impossible, right? It runs on physical hardware stacks, and things do go wrong in software development. Who's ever encountered a bug, right? Secondly, there's diminishing returns if we keep trying to make our system more and more reliable. At a most basic level, it's not really worth, if you're an internet service, being more reliable than the ISP that connects you to that service. And the third reason is that reliability comes at a cost, and we care about other things too. Here's another thing we care about. We care about launching new features. That's why software companies exist, to be able to build things that do provide meaningful functionality for our users. We want to delight our users, and we need to stay competitive in the market. But there's a trade-off here, because any level of change necessarily introduces some level of risk. It's much easier to keep a system stable if we never change it and if we never grow. But that's not what got us into this business. So if you don't think quite carefully and have some kind of system for how you're going to balance things like your feature velocity and your reliability, you can get into a situation like this, where you have one part of your organization who's really excited about the new things that they're building, and one part of your organization whose job it is to safeguard stability. And you can see how this might become problematic because we have misaligned incentives, right? So in the worst case, these two parts of your organization can be in a really adversarial relationship because their job is to do quite different things. So that is where SLOs come in. SLOs are designed to balance the competing needs of your business. So we talked already about reliability as a fundamental need, and we talked about velocity. Other factors include cost, right? An easy way to make your system more reliable is to over-provision your capacity, right? Spin up multiple copies of your service stack. But if you have 2 copies, that will be double your infrastructure costs. Reliability also costs engineering time, which is a scarce resource in many companies. So SLOs, service level objectives, are our way of mediating these different trade-offs within Google and within most different SRE organizations. So SLOs specify a quantifiable goal for what good enough reliability looks like for your system. And that's going to be very different depending on the use case that you're trying to build for. So the goal of an SLO is that you don't have one part of the organization wanting to move as fast as it can and one part of the organization wanting to keep things stable and never change. You have everybody bought in to the goal that you want to move as fast as you can, you want to run your system as efficiently as you can, provided you're meeting a minimum level of reliability where you're not actually frustrating your users and sending them away. So SLOs should be developed collaboratively between your product, part of the organization, your leadership, your development teams, and your SRE team. And it should be a minimum level of reliability that everyone feels comfortable standing behind. This is, I think, the most fundamental principle of SRE is to get on the same page around what we're aiming for. So you don't have one team scrambling to fix a problem that another team doesn't see as a problem in the first place. So we hope that SLOs track the customer experience. If you're within your SLO goal, your customers should be free to enjoy all these great features that you've built without being frustrated by reliability. But once you step below this goal, it's kind of the level where we think users start getting frustrated. So what does an SLO look like? It's not 100%. They look something like this. So usually when we're talking about SLOs, we talk about the number of nines we want to achieve. So 99.99% reliability would be 4 nines. That means that for every 10,000 requests that you receive, on average, only up to one of them will not have this desired behavior. So the most typical SLOs are around availability, so returning successful responses and latency, but we also set SLOs around other business goals like the freshness of your data, for example. Usually we measure them over a long rolling window, like a 28 or a 30-day period of time. So if we set a goal, that's all very well, but we also need some kind of protocol, some kind of consequence for what happens when we're not meeting our reliability goal. That's where error budgets come in. So we're not aiming for 100%. We've been really disciplined and thought really hard about what is an achievable and an appropriate level of reliability for us to aim for, with the knowledge that higher reliability comes at a cost to velocity, a cost to developer time. And we've come up with our desired goal. Because it's not 100%, there'll always be a gap between our SLO and perfect performance. And we can think of this gap as a budget. It's usually referred to as an error budget. Like a household budget, this is free to be spent. And you want to spend your budget on things that you care about. One of the things that we care about the most is releasing new features. So often that does introduce instability to a system, as we said before. So this is a common place to spend your budget. We don't really want to have a constant stream of small fixable errors that are degrading it. So if you have perfect reliability most of the time, then you can talk about the window of time you're allowed to be down for. So in a simple situation where your traffic is constant and you have an SLO of 99.9%, over a month, you're allowed to be hard down, 100% down for 43 minutes. So you can have a 20-minute outage, and you'd still have 23 minutes left. If that doesn't sound acceptable to your application, then you're probably not aiming for a 3.9 service. You're probably aiming for something higher. So where this becomes really important is we need a policy for what we do when our application is out of SLO. So what do we do when we've exceeded this error budget? And it's not usually pay anybody money. There's a separate construct called an SLA, which is a kind of contractual agreement, generally between organizations, but we do need to work to improve the reliability of our service because we've decided this is the level below which users will not be happy. These are the kind of things we usually do. The most common is to halt releases because we know that change is the #1 cause of system instability. But if you ran in an agile team, you could also do something like have a sprint cycle where you only pulled items from the reliability backlog. So there we go. That's our first principle of SRE. that we need quantifiable goals for our reliability, and we need a policy that's decided upon ahead of time for what we do if we're not meeting those goals. Second principle, SREs need the time and the organizational support to invest in real reliability improvements. So this is the kind of work an SRE should be doing. We should be consulting on system architecture and design. We should be building monitoring systems to tell how well we're doing, and we should be building automation systems to take care of work which is boring and error-prone. We should be working on scaling our system. We should be coordinating incident response when things do go wrong and minimizing the risk of future reoccurrence, and any other engineering projects which improve velocity, reliability, or efficiency. Here's a class of work that we don't want to be doing too much of. We call it toil. So toil is work which is manual, which is repetitive, and which is devoid of enduring value. So if you did it yesterday, today doesn't look any better because of it. It's work that scales linearly with the size of your service. So if you came to work next week and you had twice as many customers, what kinds of work would you have to do twice as much of? You can see that this is the kind of work that long-term is going to impact your organization's ability to scale, right? You can't go 10x if this is going to take up all of your engineering bandwidth. So for that reason, we measure our toil and we make sure that it's always a strictly bounded part of our role. 50% is usually the hard upper limit for this within Google Teams, and we try and stay closer to 20%. This is from the simple observation that an overloaded team doesn't have time to invest in all these reliability improvements that we know to be important. So we need a mechanism to share this load and to make sure that everyone's incentivized to build tools that don't lead to operational overload. Here are some of the ways that we regulate workload. We make sure that a developer team has some production responsibilities. Perhaps they're taking care of launches, perhaps they're dealing with a certain class of ticket. We track that SRE teams are able to complete their projects. If they're not, that raises some questions. And we're really careful about what systems we onboard. So an SRE team is by design a scarce resource, and we only take on new services if we actually have the bandwidth to do this in a successful way. We make sure that SRE interruptions are actionable. So if there's a class of page that an SRE team receives and they always end up just passing it on to a different team, they're acting as an unnecessary middle person, and that should be eliminated because it serves nobody. And of course, we make sure that we're investing in automation. All of this requires leadership buy-in. We need the organizational support to be able to push back on operational overload. The same applies to enforcing error budget procedure. So that's our second principle. SREs need to have the time and the organizational support to invest in long-term reliability improvements. Third principle, a culture of blamelessness, embracing failure so we can learn. SREs love to talk about how things break. SREs love talking about failure. That's our job, to understand systems and to understand what can go wrong. In my organization, we have a weekly meeting called Tales of Fail, where people get together and they discuss what broke that week and why it was interesting, what happened afterwards, how we fixed it. So failure has to be treated as an opportunity to learn. We've already paid the price of an outage after it's happened, or our users have paid that price, so we might as well make the most of it. The way we do that is by writing blameless postmortems and sharing them really widely. So I want to emphasize the blameless part, because this is really essential in having this culture work well. So Google did a lot of studies on what makes teams effective, not just SRE teams, engineering teams in general. And they found that the number one determinant of high-performing teams, does anyone know it? Psychological safety, exactly. And I think this is doubly true if you're talking about analyzing why things went wrong. So if you really want to get to the root cause of a problem and you really want to treat the systemic failures, then people need to be able to talk openly about what went wrong, including if they made a mistake, right? If they found a tool confusing and that caused them to press a wrong button, this is a great opportunity to improve for everybody by fixing the tool. So we're really careful to keep our postmortems blameless. Here are the kind of things we look for in a postmortem. We look for opportunities to improve our systems to reduce the risk of future incidents. Here are some axes along which we can reduce risk. So we can reduce the likelihood of this chance of failure, often by fixing an underlying bug. Sometimes it's not possible to completely eliminate a risk of failure, though. Sometimes it's a dependent system, for example. But often we can also decrease the blast radius of an incident. So how many users was this able to affect? Things like implementing incremental rollouts, for example, or release canarying can mean that even if you do still have the risk of a bug in your system, the number of users who it can affect is limited. And then we look for opportunities to reduce our time to detecting incidents and our time to resolving incidents, usually by investing in tooling. So our third principle, failure is an opportunity to improve. I'll say it again, never an excuse to brandish pitchforks. So those were our three key principles as I see them for site reliability engineering. We need quantifiable goals for our reliability that everybody believes in. We call them SLOs. We need the time and the organizational support to invest in long-term reliability improvements. And thirdly, it's essential that we treat failure as an opportunity to improve. If you're interested in SRE, this has been a sort of high-level introduction to how we think, but we've published quite a lot of literature on the nitty-gritty details about how we achieve this. So these are 3 books that are all available online and written by many of our colleagues at Google. I think we might have 1 or 2 minutes for questions, not too long. I will ask the 2 SREs in the room, could you both stand up, the 2 people who put their hands up? These are 2 of my colleagues from Google Sydney. If you're interested in SRE, do come and chat to any of us 3 later. We'd be really delighted to talk about what we do. I'll be at the careers booth as well afterwards. So if you don't want to ask a question publicly, do come have a chat. Thank you.
Yeah, so you mentioned that you measure reliability over a time frame. I'm curious to know what methods, tools, techniques.
I'll repeat it if you want.
I'll shout. So you mentioned that you measured reliability over a period of time. What tools?
Sorry, do you mind? It's on record.
So I just want to know what methods, tools, and techniques you use to measure and calculate reliability in your systems at Google.
Yeah, so at Google, we love measuring everything, and we have a whole lot of monitoring solutions that have been developed over many years to solve this problem. One of our internal tools called Monarch forms the basis of our GCP monitoring platform called Stackdriver. So you can look into how Stackdriver works if you're interested in the sort of thing we do. There's many, many talks. There are books to be written about how we monitor systems. We also do have quite a bit of detail in these books as well.
Okay, good morning. We'd like to start this session on time because I'm sure you're all looking forward to it, as I am. My name's Leanne Cameron. I'm a lecturer at James Cook University, which is why I've got my teacher eyes. For those of you who have met me before, you'll know that I'm quite passionate about every student in Australia learning to code. And you'll also know that the Australian curriculum now requires that. So from year 3 right through to year 8, every student will have hands-on experience with digital technologies. And part of that will be coding and ideally robotics. So you've got all of this competition coming up from the ranks. And so I think Australian IT industry will be quite different in the future once those students start moving through. But you're here now to listen to Andrea, and I think some of you are not friends. You've brought quite a cheer squad with you, I see, yes. For those of you who don't know, she's from Atlassian and has just spent 3 months in India. So we will like to hear all about what she's come to say, but you might like to talk to her a little later about her adventures in India. So I'll pass over now to Andrea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne. Leanne's actually my mum's name, so it kind of feels like my mum just introduced me. And that's helping settle me. And this is a very family feel today. It's a bit of a small room, but I think we're going to be small but mighty, and I hope you learn something today. So today, I'm going to tell you a story about me, my team, and a pig. And in my team, we have two kinds of Fridays. There's regular Fridays, which we all love. You know, it's the beginning of the weekend, and they're great. But then we have demo Fridays. And on demo Fridays, my whole team gets together. There's over 50 of us, designers, analysts, supports, engineers. We all get together and we share what we've been working on. And I love demo Fridays, because after every presentation, we clap. And clapping is the best, because clapping is just the sound of appreciation, and it's this really energizing sound, I think. Unfortunately, in my team, some people have been getting confused about what they're supposed to be doing with their hands. And instead of a lot of clapping, there's been a lot of tapping. And this really just gets me down. There's a lot of people looking at laptops, they're not engaged, they're not getting into the demos. And even if they were to put their demos down, if they're not engaged, you get this kind of sad clapping effect. We're going to demonstrate this today. If I can get my friends in the corner, just give me a kind of like sad clap. Yeah, that was great, right? Yeah. Now, to kind of clear that negative energy out of the room, can I get everyone to give a really big clap? Biggest clap you've given all conference. And that's it. No, thank you for that. Oh, that's a good buzz, but it's an energizing feeling, right? Everybody clapping together and enjoying themselves. And that's what I wanted more of from my team. I wanted more of those moments. And I'm really fortunate, as was mentioned, I work at Atlassian, and Atlassian has some really great values. And one of those values empowers people that if something's not working the way that they want it to, that they go ahead and change that themselves. And so in the spirit of this value of being the change that you seek, I took it upon myself to start making some changes. And this was kind of terrifying, but I've been on a great journey so far. And what I really want to share with you today is what I've learned so far. The things that I think help make really great product demos, some of the things we've tried, whether they've worked or not. And hopefully you'll take away something today that you can take back to your teams. And I've split the presentation today into 4 sections, and each of them are actions that I've been trying to encourage people to take during demos. And I picked these because I think they apply to demos of all sizes. Because you might just be showing something to one person, or to your small team of 5, or like me, you might have a huge team of 50 plus people that you're presenting to. And I think these things are always applicable. So you're going to talk about structuring demos to make sure that they're fair and inclusive for everyone. Encouraging people to share customer context of their work during demos. Focusing on learning, which I think Anna covered really well if you were here for the presentation before, that kind of having a learning mindset. And most importantly, celebrating and being yourself. So structuring demos sounds kind of dull. You don't want to have too much structure. They're supposed to be a kind of fun and easy thing. But there's a problem if you don't structure your demos. Or if you think you have a structure, but it might not be that great, which is what we had. We thought everyone was kind of getting their fair share. And then someone gets a little bit excited, and someone ends up taking more than their fair share. And this is what was happening with us. Ooh, sorry. We had a system for demos where anyone could sign up. Individuals would just put their name down, and they could present something. Problem was, if you had a lot of individuals sign up, like 20, and you've got an hour's time slot, then you ended up with trying to give everybody 3 minutes. And this was horrible. We had people getting cut off. We tried to stop people from asking them questions. You know, we'd run overtime. People would leave the meeting. We'd try and get them to present in 2 weeks' time, and they would forget and give up. It was a super inefficient system. And so one of the first changes that I made when I took over was to reassign this. And rather than having individuals signing up, I tried a system where we had teams sign up. So in Jira Service Desk, we have quite a big team, and within that we have smaller sub-teams who work on particular features or domains, knowledge areas. And there's about 7 of those teams. So I said, what if just one person from each team demos? Then you can assign everyone the same amount of time, just 5 minutes for that team, and they know they have the same amount of time every week. And the added benefit here is that we could include time for questions with that. You know, if you've got fewer presenters, you've got less plugging in and out of cables, less breaks, less distractions, you've got a whole lot more time for what's really valuable. And that's creating those moments where you can engage between the presenter and the audience. And while I was already messing around and making changes, something that's been really important to me is making sure that everyone feels included. And in Service Desk, we're really lucky that we have a fully remote team. They're amazing, so we've got people from all across Australia and a couple in Europe. And I wanted to make sure that those people were having the same experience of demos as everyone else in the room, or as close as I could get. And so something else that I did at this time was introduce kind of a remote empathy champion. So we'd have one person in the room who'd be sitting there with noise-canceling headphones on and on their laptop. They were the only person allowed on their laptop. And they'd be watching the demos via video conferencing and checking that whoever was watching it remotely or watching it later would be able to hear all the questions, know everything that was going on, see all the slides, because you know that technology, particularly VC technology, does not always behave the way we want it to. And so they were kind of our, remote empathy person. And this is where Rosa became important. So this is Rosa. She is my demo pig. And she has the voice of justice. So it was really daunting for me to think about trying to keep people to time and tell them when their time was up. So I don't tell anyone, it's Rosa. So Rosa gives people a kind of warning onk at 4 minutes and a couple of oinks at 5 minutes when it's their time to wrap up. And it's great because it takes it off me to be doing that. And everyone just refers to Rosa as kind of the boss of demos now. So if I'm struggling to get off stage, you know who to get to help. So now I've got Rosa as an authority kind of giving me structure, and hopefully it's fair and equitable and clear for everyone. The next challenge was, well, teams have 5 minutes. What do they do with that time? What is the best thing to present in those 5 minutes of your demo to make sure you're creating the greatest connection with the people in your audience who've come? Because it's a really big commitment. You've got your whole team together for an hour. That almost never happens. And so you want to be making the most of it. And even though we work on different teams, the one thing that ties us together is that we're all trying to solve problems for the same group of customers. And what we really want to do is build the best product possible for them. So I encouraged people when they were giving their demos to share customer stories. And an example of where this made a big impact was one team, during their presentation, showed off something that they'd built. And what they'd built was a new thing in the sidebar. They put a new item in the sidebar navigation, and that was awesome. Engineering work was involved. It was definitely something to demo, but that was it. And when you kind of, after the presentation, it was really hard to know what to take away from that. So I talked to them afterwards, and I asked them why they'd done that. Why had they put this in the navigation? What was the goal? And what I found out is that their product manager had done some research into people who were trialing the product and found out that people were sad because they were trialing it, trying to do something specific, and we were missing functionality that they wanted. Except, awkwardly, we actually had all that functionality that they were looking for, but customers couldn't find it because all that functionality was hidden 3 clicks deep into settings where nobody goes. And so this team's goal was to take all this functionality people were looking for, bring it up to the top level nav, and hope that when people were trialing the product, they could find this and they could get value out of it. And hopefully that would lead to more people purchasing the product and enjoying our products more. And all of a sudden you've gone from a story that's, cool, we built a thing, to we built a thing to solve a problem and we're creating value. And that's something that you can really connect with. And it creates that shared understanding between you and your team. And it also creates a shared understanding between you and your customer. And I think that's really important because for me personally, sometimes I felt like sometimes I still feel like I'm kind of a bad engineer because I don't really love writing code. It's not something that gets me up in the morning. But I do love solving problems for customers. And so understanding my work within the context of the people who I'm trying to make life better for, even if it's just making Jira easier to use, that was something that was a lot more motivating, and I felt like I did a much better job because of it. And over time, as I had more and more of these conversations with my product manager to understand the customers that we were building for, I've been on Jira Service Desk for a couple of years now. I've built up a little bit of knowledge, and I actually feel like I can help shape the product. You know, I'm not just pulling things off the backlog and working through them. I'm part of the product, and I can actually, you know, make decisions and make trade-offs that'll actually create the best value for customers. And if you think about being able to create that feeling for everyone in your team, then you're suddenly in a much better position to be delivering the best value possible for customers. And I really wasn't sure how best to do this, but what I tried to do was I just created a really simple presentation template, and I gave that to teams so that when they were going to demo, they could download this template, and it just asked some really simple prompting questions. You know, does what you're doing align with your goals? You know, what pain are you solving? Is there some sort of data that you've gathered that tells you about this problem? And the hope was that this would prompt them to have conversations with people in their team if they didn't know the answers, and be able to give that context during their presentations. Now, an interesting challenge that I came across was now that we had this new system of every team was given a slot to present, it was really obvious when a team was not presenting because the team would get called and nobody would come up. We just had this like awkward moment. And for me, this was absolutely like mind-boggling because I would present every week for my team if they let me. So I was really curious why it was that these teams weren't presenting anything. And so I started talking to them, and as I was talking to them, I found out that we have some kind of stigmas around product demos. And those became apparent from the answers they gave me of why they weren't demoing. Things like, oh, it's just not quite finished, it's not quite perfect, we'll definitely show it in 2 weeks. Or, we've just been working on tech debt and bugs, like, it's not interesting, it's not worth showing anyone. Or, one of my favorites, we spent the 2 weeks trying to integrate with this service and realized we had no idea what it actually did, and so nothing worked out and just don't look there. Or we're still trying to solve this problem, but we need another team to help us and we just can't get a hold of them. And for me, it was really hard because this is a kind of human problem, right? You're trying to get people to talk about things that aren't just showing something shiny and new. And I think demos by their name are kind of bad for that because they make you think that you have to have something to demo. You have to have something to show. But really what we want to know is, you know, have you learned something during the week? Because everything that you do, you should be learning something, and particularly when you have a big team, can you share something that will multiply the value of your team? And so for example, you know, the thing's not quite finished, but wouldn't you rather share early, share often, and get some insights from your team? Because, I mean, I know one of the reasons I work at Atlassian is because I work with incredibly brilliant people. And so I want to learn as much from them as possible, and I want to learn that early so I can start to integrate that feedback really quickly. And in my more confident moments, I also like to think that I can teach people something. So I like to think that I've learned something that I can share. And this can be really hard when what you've learned from is a failure, or a mistake, or just something that didn't go to plan. It can be really hard to share that. But what I like to think is, well, isn't it more embarrassing if you then see another team do the same thing in a couple of weeks or a month's time, and you've both failed just because you were afraid to share your failure? I think that's way more embarrassing. So I always encourage teams to share that learning as much as possible. And even if you haven't failed yet, or you're still struggling with something, you've got some kind of ongoing challenge, sharing that challenge is a great way to identify an opportunity for you to work together with other teams, because those other teams might be facing the exact same issue, and then they can help you out, and you've suddenly got more people on your side. And I didn't want to introduce another thing into the process, so I just chucked another slide into the presentation template that, again, asks some of these questions to get people thinking, like, what are we learning? Even if you haven't come across a struggle, maybe you can think back to the previous feature you built. I know in my team, we always set these goals for our features, and we never go back and check them. So prompting teams to go back and see, what have you learned from previous efforts that you can share, and what can you do to kind of multiply your team. And finally, this is obviously my favorite section because I love being myself. I mean, I bought a rubber pig to work. This is me. And I couldn't think of a better way to tell you about celebrating and being yourself than to introduce you to some of my team members. This is Ryan. He's a designer on our team. You notice he's wearing a bit of a funny hat. That hat is actually the demo hat, much like Rosa is the demo pig. And I don't actually remember where the sombrero came from or who first started wearing it, but everyone wears the same hat when they demo. That's just what you do. You're demoing, you put the hat on, and that is the signal that you are kind of the commander of the room. My team really wanted me to bring it to present today, but I thought that would not only be distracting, but also really weird to take on the plane. Now, as I said, we have remote team members as well. This is Dominic, he works out of Germany. And so, of course, he's not in the office to wear the sombrero, but he solved that problem himself by just wearing his own hats. And he wears a different hat every time, which is great because whenever you know he's demoing, you know he's going to pop up, and the only thought in your head is like, what hat is he going to wear? What hat is going to be this week? And this is one of my favorites. This is another developer on my team. His name is Ben. And Ben has one of those like weird punny brains. Like he's always switched on. And so whenever he presents a demo, he somehow finds a song that matches what he's demoing, which for software demos, I don't know how he does it, but he does it. And so he plays that song as he's walking up to present. And it kind of gives you a hint of what he's going to present, but most of the time it's pretty tenuous. But it's great because you know that, again, whenever he presents, he's gonna play some music and it's cool. For me, whenever I demo, I fill my Jira with dog GIFs because I couldn't think of anything better than if I was watching a demo, I would want to see gratuitous dog GIFs. So somehow my customer stories always relate to dogs. And finally, this is Vanessa. She's another remote worker. I know that this photo looks really weird. She is actually a cardboard cutout. People told me it looked real, but she's a cutout. And we have a cutout of every single one of our remote team members in the office. And it's great, we scatter them around. Sometimes we set up like sets with them. It's great fun. It's great. It is a little weird. Sometimes we put them outside meeting rooms and scare people. It's hilarious. But they're also great because they're that visual reminder that, oh yes, I'm not just presenting to the people in this room, I'm presenting to others, and I want to make it the best for them. As for how you get people to celebrate and be themselves, I don't really know. All I can say is try to lead by example. That's how this ended up happening. This is my whole team. You'll notice they're all holding soft toys. If you want to know how that happened, please chat to me afterwards. It's all my fault. So to kind of wrap up today, these are the 4 actions that I think you can take to create great product demos, or at least get on your way to creating more of those electrifying moments in your team. I definitely think it's important that it's fair and inclusive and that you create a structure that would allow you to achieve that, that you encourage people to think about the customers they're building for, or whatever other context is really important to draw people together. Definitely focus on learning and always sharing. You should always have something to share. And 100%, no matter what you do, don't make demos a really serious meeting. They should always be fun, because as technologists, and I'm sure you've experienced this throughout this conference, we're doing some awesome stuff. And we should be celebrating that and having fun and being proud of that all of the time. Thank you very much.
I'm so looking forward to using the pig. Has anyone got any questions, Andrea, at all? Do you want to move over to the mic so they can hear you?
Jump? That works too.
See, that's ours.
Problem solving.
At your demo meetings, do you ever demo tech-specific tasks, or do you have some other forum to do very internal, maybe adding a new metric or something?
We definitely encourage that kind of presentation at demos. Demos are really broad for us. They're showing absolutely anything that your team's been working on. We have some other meetings, like we call them back-enders catch-up and front-enders catch-up, that are if you're looking at specific tech and you want to kind of share more in-depth details of them. because demos are attended by everyone, so like designers, support, and analysts, we want to make sure that what we're sharing kind of makes sense to all of them. But if you're introducing a new tech in your service, that's definitely something you can present in demos as well.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Have you ever used any of these like skills or like anything like that for presenting to shareholders instead of like within your team?
That's a great question. Someone actually asked me that yesterday as well while I was pitching myself. Yeah, I think that all of these tips work, again, not just internally, but if you're sharing something externally with customers as well. I think if you're writing documentation, for example, we write support readiness, all the things like sharing that customer context of kind of why you made this change to your product. We always have that section at the top of our support readiness documents because it kind of grounds it, and it also means that support team kind of get it as well. So when people ask questions about it, they're not just like, oh, I know what the API does. They also know why we built it. So yeah, I definitely think you can use it sharing with external stakeholders as well. And some of the demos in Atlassian, like ours is just our product team, but sometimes bigger orgs do them as well. So we'll do them with the kind of org level that we're part of. And so those are more like our stakeholders trying to get tidbits of information as well. Yeah.
Okay, we've got less than a minute. Anyone who wants to whip anything through?
Lightning question.
No?
Why is she named Rosa? Can anyone guess? Who I haven't already told the answer to. You don't get to answer. Oh, that was exactly what Skylar said. No, it's because it means pink, and I was learning Portuguese at the time.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to thank Angela?